It's not gonna suffer.
Yes,
It's not gonna whistle,
no,
screech.
Even if you leave it here, it should be strong enough.
But before it was.
Okay.
Huh?
Put it like very low, honey. It's very sensitive.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد. Okay. Thank you for coming tonight, inshallah. We'll continue. Start off with a recap. I think I covered this recap last time, I'm not sure. Anyway. Okay, so we've started the Medina period straight after the Hijrah. I quickly talked about the differences between what a Meccan surah is and what a Medinan surah is, and why they're classified as Meccan and Medinan. And the difference is the Hijrah. Hijrah, anything revealed of the Quran before the Hijrah is a Meccan surah. Anything after the Hijrah is a Medinan surah. So even if the Prophet after the Hijrah went to Mecca after the Hijrah, it's still regarded as a Medinan surah. So some of the differences between the Meccan and Medinan surahs, what a short summary of both. The Meccan surahs are shorter, not always. Surah Al-Kahf is a Meccan surah, but it's one of the longer ones. They're poetic, full of emotion, and focus on Iman, Tawheed, the hereafter, the Day of Judgment, perseverance under persecution, and stories of the prophets. And the main audience was Quraysh and the disbelievers in Mecca. The Medinan surahs are mostly longer. They talk about law and community guidance, Sharia. So are topics which are more relevant to building a society, a new nation. Family and social laws, warfare and governance, relations with Ahl Kitab and the hypocrites. And the audience of mostly the Muslim community, but not just the Muslims, also the Jewish community in Medina. So the Meccan period was a period of preparation for the future, for the building a state during the Medinian period. So I talked about briefly the second pledge of Al-Aqaba, the Bayt Al-Aqaba Thaniya, and some of the points or some of the pledges that the people of Medina, the Ansar, made before the Hijrah. And they pretty much summarize the Meccan period and what the preparation the Muslims had to go through in order for the Medinian period. And the last one was the people of Al-Ansar of Medina, they made a pledge to defend the Prophet, physically defend the Prophet if he is physically attacked. The population of Medina, when the Prophet Rasulullah immigrated in Medina, there were three types of people living in Medina, and there would later be four people. First up were the Muslims, then you had the Mushrikeen and the Jews. So at the time of the Hijrah, many people had converted, many people had still not converted yet. So those who were not converted were the Mushrikeen. And of course, there were the Jews in Medina. And the Jews were considered three tribes, Banu Qaynuqa, Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. And the fourth group that would appear in the near future, would be the Munafiqun, the hypocrites, those who pretended to convert to Islam. As soon as the Prophet arrived in Medina, the first things he did, establish mosques, one in Quba, one in Medina. He declared a brotherhood between Al-Aws and Khazraj, and not only between Al-Aws and Khazraj, but between the people of Medina and the people of Mecca as well. he also encouraged the people of Medina to try and give work to the people, the new refugees coming from Mecca, to lessen the economic impact on Medina, because they were basically refugees. And I talked briefly about the water well in Medina, Bi'r Ruma, how it used to be owned by a Jew. The Prophet encouraged the Muslims to buy that well from the Jews, to secure a water source for the Muslims. And also the Prophet commissioned, not commissioned, he ordered the Muslims to try and build a marketplace, or an Islamic marketplace, because the markets in Medina were owned by the Jews. He needed an Islamic marketplace so that Islamic law would be applied instead of a Jewish marketplace where anybody could do whatever they want. They cheat and lie. With the Islamic marketplace, they are constrained by Sharia. Quraysh started also after the Hijrah. They tried their best to try and make the Muslims feel uncomfortable. They still wouldn't leave them alone, even though Muslims had lived in Mecca. Muslims had traveled to Medina, so they tried to threaten them and said, "We will come and fight you and kill you all." They tried. The Muslims in Medina also are afraid that someone might come and from Mecca to try and assassinate the Prophet, even in Medina. They cut diplomatic ties with Medina. They prohibited people of Medina from coming to Mecca to visit the Kaaba, even though it wasn't their right. The Kaaba was not the property of Quraysh. Anybody could travel to Mecca and visit the Kaaba, even a Muslim. But Quraysh thought otherwise. Quraysh even sent a raiding party, to all the way to Medina to try and hopefully to steal something or to kill somebody. And they had one small party. They were partially able they stole some animals. This party under Qarz ibn Jabir al-Fihri. The Jews of Medina, now, they were a different people. So in order to create some sort of connection, some sort of friendship between the Muslims and the Jews, the Qibla was first established towards the city of Jerusalem. And also when the Prophet arrived in Medina, he found that the Jews were fasting on the day of Ashura. And when he found out why they were fasting, he ordered the Muslims to do the same, to fast on the day of Ashura. The Ashura, according to the Jews, was the day that the Prophet Musa had let the Jews out of Egypt. The three Jewish tribes, were mostly hostile. Hardly anybody converted to Islam, with very, very few exceptions. One exception was Abdullah ibn Salam. So Abdullah ibn Salam was one of the more knowledgeable Jews in Medina, highly respected, highly loved by the Jewish community themselves, and very knowledgeable about the Torah. So he had a conversation with Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad, and he concluded that Sayyidina Muhammad was the true messenger, and he converted to Islam. In order to test the rest of the Jews, see how they would react, he got him to sort of hide in another place inside the building. He brought some Jews and asked them about Abdullah ibn Salam. And they first said he's a good man, we respect him, we love him. And then he came out in front of them and said the Shahada in front of them. And as when they turned 180 degrees, they swore at him and said, "You are the worst human being," etc., etc. Another exception to the rule was Safiya bint Huyay ibn al-Akhtab, but she is converted later. But apart from them, hardly any Jews were converted to Islam. Hardly any. And they were very much against the Prophet and against the Muslims, and tried their best to break them up. So because they refused to convert, the Prophet made a treaty with the Jews, a special treaty just for the Jews. This treaty basically said, amongst all the different conditions in the treaty, that all the people in Medina would ally themselves in a war. If Medina is attacked by an outside army, that they would unite and defend the city against any outside people, especially Quraysh. Now, the Jews also, as I said, they were very hostile to the Muslims, to the Prophet. And they tried their best to confuse the Muslims, to try and get the Muslims to leave Islam. So they claimed, yes, there's somebody mentioned in their books of a future prophet or Messiah, but they said, we know our books better, and Muhammad is not that man. They also, some Jews pretended to convert to Islam for a short time, and then they reverted. They left Islam, saying, Islam they found it is full of lies, and it's a false religion, just to confuse the new Muslims in Medina. Okay, that was a quick recap. Again, and Allah spoke about, revealed a verse in the Quran about this. Believe in what has been revealed to the believers in the morning and rejected in the evening, so they may abandon their faith. So these are the Jews who pretended to convert to Islam, and then later they left the religion, but saying the religion is false and it's wrong, and Muhammad is not a prophet. And some Jews also claimed that they might go to hellfire, but only for a few days, and then they'll be out of hellfire. So no need to convert to Islam, not to be a Muslim. The Jews also tried to create division amongst the Aus and Khazraj, the two Arab tribes already living in Medina before the Prophet immigrated. So before the immigration, Aus and Khazraj, they used to fight each other, and the Jews used to sell weapons and arms, and they even allied themselves. So two tribes would ally with one tribe, and one Jewish tribe with the other tribe. And whenever there's a war between the two Arab tribes, the Jewish tribes themselves would also fight. And this one Jew, Shas ibn Qais, came up with this plan. He wanted to to plant somebody amongst the Aus al-Khazraj, and to try and recite some poetry, remind them of the old days, of what used to happen. These other tribes used to kill your people, and you had to fight each other. And this was meant to incite anger, inflame the anger between the Aus and Khazraj. And for a short time, it was almost successful. When the Prophet heard about this, he quickly got up and went and addressed everybody. He said, do not listen to him. This is an attempt to, you are all Muslims, you are one people. Why you are fighting each other? And another thing another story is story of Finhas, a Jewish man named Finhas. So, Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, I'm not sure why, I think he was visiting one of these special schools, Jewish schools for children, where they teach the Torah. So he met this man called Finhas, and Finhas started saying some bad things about Allah, saying Allah is poor. He wants us to lend him money. من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا فيضاعفه له فأضعافا كثيرة والله يقبضه ويبسطه وإليه ترجعون. So talking about, is this riba? Allah wants to give riba, and this is haram. So how can this be a true religion? You are hypocritical. And then Abu Bakr, when he heard this, he was so angry, he bashed this Jew. And it was very unusual for Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He was a very mild-tempered man, not violent at all. But when he heard what he heard, this Jewish person was saying about Allah, he couldn't control himself, he bashed him. So this Jewish man went to the Prophet to complain about Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He said, look at what he did to me. So the Prophet asked Abu Bakr, is this true? He said, yes, and he said why he did it. And then he asked, and then he went to the Jew, he said, did you do this? Did you speak these things about Allah? And this Jewish man, Finhas, he denied it, he lied, he said, I didn't say it. So Allah sends down the verse from the Quran, لَقَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ فَقِيرٌ وَنَحْنُ أَغْنِيَاءُ. Allah confirmed what Abu Bakr was saying. This Jew said, Allah is poor, we are rich, we certainly have recorded their slurs. Allah has recorded everything he said. And then Allah, in a few verses later, he says, in that situation, what you should do is you should be patient, do not lose your temper. You will surely be tested in your wealth and in your wealth and yourselves, and you will certainly hear many hurtful words from those who are given the scripture before you, and from the polytheists. But if you are patient and mindful of Allah, surely this is resolved to aspire to. In tasbiru wa tattaqu, inna Allah, inna dhalika min azmi al-umur. So you hear these days people also similar things, saying bad things about the Prophet, about Islam. The answer is not to go become violent and to hit and kill. It's to be patient and try to teach people about the truth about Islam. Okay, so Badr. So now we've come 6 months after the Hijrah. The situation in Medina has sort of calmed down. And Allah reveals this following verse: أُذِنَ لِلَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ. So basically this verse is giving the Muslims permission to fight back. Not to go to war, but to fight back. Because until then, until this verse was revealed, they had not been even allowed to fight back. Even in Mecca, where they were being tortured and being insulted and killed, many of them being executed and killed, they couldn't fight back. Now, they had been given permission to fight back. Now, at the same time, when Quraysh had started to seize property that Muslims had left behind. The Muslims had left Mecca, live in Medina, and left everything behind. So Quraysh thought it would be a good idea to steal this property and sell it for a profit. So one thing the Muslims could do, because they were going to sell these the items, the things they stole, they would send them off to sell them in markets in distant places, in Syria and Yemen, etc. So what the Muslims started to do was because Medina was on the route of the caravan trade routes, so they were able to send out small forces to try and capture these caravans. So for a period of about 1 year, they sent about 8 different. They made 8 different raids against different caravans. And these raids had a big effect on the Muslim morale as well. Because they had suffered, and the Prophet only sent people of Muhajirin on these raids, not Ansar. These people, the Muhajirin were from Quraysh, they were from Mecca, and they were the people who had been affected most by Quraysh. Their own property had been stolen by Quraysh. And they had the morale needed some boost. They needed to boost their morale. So by sending them out on capture these caravans, it raised their morale. On top of that, it gave them good training in riding camels and horses in long distances, in fighting as well. And also, because Medina was a new place to them, it was new. So by them going out in different raids and sorties, they started to know the environment, know the routes around Medina. The last of these raids was the raid on Nakhla, or Sarayt Nakhla. This was very important, and we'll get to that, why it was very important. Now, Nakhla is different to all the others, previous 7 raids. The previous 7 raids were around this Medina, not far from Medina. Nakhla, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. It was very close to Mecca. So about 480 kilometers away from Medina, and about a few kilometers, 20 kilometers away from Mecca itself. So the Prophet sent a force of 12 people. He didn't go out with them. He gave them written instructions, and these instructions were sealed. And he ordered the leader of the party to not open those orders until after 2 days' travel, like secret instructions. So after 2 days, they read the instructions and said, go to Nakhla, and you'll find this caravan there at Nakhla. So Nakhla is between Mecca and Ta'if. And he said, whoever, it is completely voluntary, so you do not order anybody to go with you. They all have to volunteer to come. And they all volunteered, and they all traveled all the way to Nakhla. Now, they arrived at the location on the last night of Rajab. Rajab, as you know, is one of the 4 sacred months in the Islamic calendar. Ashhur al-Huram. So, according to the customs of the time, even amongst the non-Muslims, these 4 months were holy, sacred months. You couldn't kill, you couldn't do anything like, aggression. However, they were stuck. This small force, these Muslims. What do? Do they attack this caravan during the month of Rajab, or do they wait the next day when it's the first day of Sha'ban, which is not one of the 4 sacred months? But if they waited until the next day, this caravan would escape and arrive safely in Mecca, where it would be, again, Mecca is sacred territory, they couldn't attack it. So I had a quick, they consulted each other and they decided to attack this caravan even during Rajab. And they captured it. One person amongst the caravan had died, was killed, but it was a lot of money, a lot of booty that they captured. And they went back all the way to Medina. Now, the Muslims criticized them. They said, you attacked them during the month of Ramadan. Even the Prophet himself was unsure. Initially he was unsure what to say to them. He didn't criticize them, but he didn't say you did the right thing. But they were still criticized, not only by the Muslim community, but the rest of the Arabs in Mecca. They said, how could you do this? And Quraysh themselves, they criticized them, even though this was hypocrisy, because they themselves had done similar things while the Muslims live in Mecca, torturing and killing people, Muslims in Mecca. So, shortly after, Allah revealed this verse from the Quran. يسألك عن الشهر الحرام قتال فيه قل قتال فيه كبير وصد عن سبيل الله وكفر به والمسجد الحرام وإخراج أهله منه أكبر عند الله. So Allah confirms that the 4 months, holy months, are sacred months, but hindering others from the path of Allah and rejecting Him and expelling the worshippers from the sacred mosque is a greater sin in the sight of Allah. For persecution is far worse than killing, and they will not stop fighting you until they turn you away from your faith. And yes, actually these are the same verses, but there were 2 verses. فَيَسْأَلُكَ عَنْ شَهْرِ الْحَرَامِ, and the verse after, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله أولئك يرجون رحمة الله والله غفور رحيم. Allah not only says that what they did is right, He says He forgives them. He says what they did was completely correct. Nothing wrong with it. And then at this point, then another verse, some other verses come down. Surah Al-Baqarah. This time, this is the command to go to war. وقاتلوا في سبيل الله الذين يقاتلونكم ولا تعتدوا وإن الله لا يحب المعتدين. So this is now an instruction to go to war against Quraysh. So all these raids that had sent out outside of Medina to capture these caravans, also a declaration of war. So all this happened, and just before Badr, so the last 2 months before Badr. And during the month of Sha'ban, Allah, in order to test the Muslims, there were a few things that Allah commanded the Muslims to do. Number 1 was to fast the month of Ramadan. Also, the second one was to pay zakah. There were a couple of other things. I don't remember, but this happened immediately before the month of Ramadan, and Ramadan was the Battle of Badr. So this is the month before Battle of Badr and month of Ramadan. Inshallah, we'll cover that next time. Any questions or any comments from anybody? Or? Inshallah. Okay, فستذكرون ما أقول لكم وفوض أمر الله إن الله بصير بالعباد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.